to see the temple, many of the boards had disappeared. When we are looking at renovating temples and making them better for the devotees, what we forget is that there are things on the floor, and merely, putting marble slabs or granite slabs on top is destroying evidence of this. Now, many of you may say, சரி ஆடுப்புள்ளி ஆட்டம் இருந்தது, அதனால என்ன அந்த கோவிலில் இருக்குது, இல்லாட்டா எல்லாருக்கும் தெரியும். But it is not just one ஆடுப்புள்ளி ஆட்டம். What we have realized is the more we document, the more we understand the popularity of the games, the spread of the games. So I'll give you an example. If you go to the Tiruvatiyur temple, in the mandapam just outside the Sanadi, within a space of just this much, you will see 4 Adupuliyattam boards, all well cut into the ground, and from the look of it, all the slabs seem to have been more or less similar and likely to have been placed there together. These are things we look at. So for example, if the slab is a slightly different color or texture or gradation, we know that maybe it was replaced later. This is not like that. In fact, on a single slab, we saw 2 Adupuliyatams. It gives you an indication of how many people wanted to play that game, that you needed 2 boards less than 2 feet away from each other. 2, it gives you a sense of how far did these games spread geographically. Which games were popular where. So again, to use the Kapalishwar temple, and I will play a video where you'll understand better, I've documented this circular Adupuliyattam. It's a very different version. The concept is the same, but not played so much in Tamil Nadu. You'll see it more in northern Karnataka and places like that. The fact that there were 2 boards in the same temple is very interesting. And those of us who know our history know that the Vijayanagar dynasty were deeply involved in the renovation of the temple. So I like to imagine that artisans came here and maybe they cut the board on the stone slab so that, Saingalo, after the day's work was done, they had to pass the time. There were no TV screens in those days. So sometimes it was just a chance for them to play, to remember home, to do the things that they were familiar with. And these are things, those 2 boards have been completely lost in the renovations to the temple. There were 2 boards, both have been lost. Sadly, when I started documenting games, I used to only take photos of the boards. So when I talk to the temple authorities, they say, அது அங்க இல்லவே இல்லை, நீங்க வேற எங்கேயோ எடுத்துட்டு இங்க இருந்ததுன்னு சொல்றீங்க. So now what I started doing is taking videos of everything. So even tomorrow, if there's renovation, I have absolute proof of where the games were, how they came, which space, how deeply they were cut, and many other things. Some of the questions we can ask is, how did the games come there? Remember that temple renovations and building took years. Families lived there. It's like L&T has a whole, place where all their builders are living when there are projects that take a long period of time. So people played. They didn't have anything else. There was no laptops or cell phones or televisions in those days. There was no TikTok or YouTube or Insta. So people played games. Could some of these have been done by stray visitors to the temple? Absolutely. And you will see some boards like that. But many of them are deep cut into the granite and precise lines. When you go to the Kapalishwar temple next, take a minute just next to the Murugan Sanadi, next to the pillar, you will see the most beautiful Adupuliyattam where the cross lines are done in a curved fashion. Beautiful parallel curves. It's the work of an artist. It is not the work of Yaro Poet. Just kiri to vandadu. It is so beautiful to see. When you go there, Please do take a look at it. You will see in many other temples, people will add their own embellishments and curves to the game. It's very attractive to see Adupuliyattam Mela. They'll have two shuris like that. And very nice. And actually, at the Maduranthakam temple, somebody has signed his name at the bottom of the Adupuli board. In the Chinna Kurandella cricket battle, this is my Adupuli board. Don't touch it. It's mine. He signed his name at the bottom. So there are some very fascinating things we get to see. But before I talk more, I'd like to show you a video of the Kapaleshwar temple. There are two other things I'd like you to note in the video. I was saying we document things on the floors. Adupuliyattam, all of you know, all of you recognize. But there are many other things, squares on the floor. So how do we know which is a game and which is not? So as a person doing research, I document everything. Sometimes I don't know if it's a game, whether it's a column or it's something else. So to give you a small example, in Kapaleshwar temple, I saw this flower. It's a half-finished flower. And I saw this many years ago also. And I said, "Idu kolo yaro pota." I just took it. But I've seen the same half-finished flower in Tiruvatiur temple and 3-4 other temples. And you will always find it in a strange place. Now, genuina colonna, it will be in the center, in front of a doorway, not near some thorn in some corner somewhere. So I started getting puzzled about it and looked at it more and more. Why are there so many of these flowers in strange places everywhere? And I started digging. And then I realized that there is a game that is played both in Africa and as far away as New Zealand, which has a very similar kind of board. Now, is it the same game? I don't know. I am like everyone else. I'm just a seeker. I'm seeking answers to questions. I don't know. There is no record of a game being played like that. But then what explains this flower? And this is not the only one. I see so many games like this where there's no record of a game. But then when you start digging, you see similar games played in other parts of India or abroad. Pallanguri is played extensively across Africa as a mankala. Is it so difficult to believe that some other game may have been played which is similar to what they play in Africa? I don't think so. So like this, we discover many things. The other thing which I have found interesting is in many temples outside the Sannadhi, and I have tried understanding more talking to architects, there's a slightly raised slab. And in many of these temples, this raised slab has a grid which is very similar to a board game. Is it coincidence? I don't know. So in the Kapaleshwar temple, I will show you, there is a 5x5 raised slab. That board you will see in 2 places in the temple. I was in the Suchindram Kovil some time ago, and interestingly, they had a 9x9 raised slab. And the same game played on a 9x9 board, you can find in many places around the Suchindram temple. So was it an offering slab? Was it a game? Did the game inspire the offering slab? Did the offering slab inspire the game? We have no answers. The more I study about traditional games, I get fewer answers and more questions. And the only people who have the answers are those older people who maybe in the cobwebs of your mind can remember something. So if you remember games you played, you remember any memories, please reach out to us because we are trying to figure out more and more about our games. We're going to stop talking for a few minutes, let you watch the video and then return. Volume? Volume? Okay. While they're connecting it, if you have any questions on anything I've said so far, please do ask me.
Have you looked into the colonial impact on this? Because many of these temples were occupied. Kabalishwar temple was occupied for 6 months. Siddharth was occupied for 2 years.
Absolutely.
So, and a typical soldier, a colonial soldier, is somebody who needs to play games inside. He can't come out.
Absolutely, and you will find there are similarities between games in India and across the world. I will address your question in a while, and particularly with regard to one game. Yeah? Will you play? Oh, not yet. So yes, there are similarities between games. There is this game called Dadi, which I will show you later on in the presentation, which you find in many temples across Tamil Nadu, not just Chennai. But people don't remember the game, and people don't know how it's played. They don't even have a name for it in here. But if you cross the border and go to the Telugu-speaking heartland, the game is still very, very popular. The same game is known in the West as Nine Men's Morris. And recently there was an excavation in Poland where in a 500-year-old castle that was excavated, they found the same game. But we don't know whether the game came from there here or went from here there. Both possible. And I will share a little bit of information with you. When I was doing some research in Mahabalipuram, right under the butterball, and I kid you not, under the butterball, where you can barely reach, there is a carving of this game, which means it must have been done. I couldn't even take my cell phone. So it must have been done before the butterball even came to that spot. Right? There's no way anyone could have carved it before that. You can't get a hammer and chisel in. There's no space even for my fingers to go in. So when I see all of this, I wonder whether it went from here there rather than vice versa. Ready? I will come to that in a minute. Sorry. No, it would not have been played when the butterball came. It must have been done even before the butterball came. Because other than this game of Dadi, there is another game which is half hidden by the butterball. The butterball is actually sitting on top of it. So it was definitely there before the butterball.
Place that's surrounded with the sound of peacocks. Today there are no peacocks there, and it is a busy area with teeming crowd.
Okay.
Mylapore or Thirumailai is one of the oldest areas of Chennai and has a unique ambience. It was earlier known as Mylapore or Mailarpil, the place that's surrounded with the sound of peacocks. Today there are no peacocks there, and it is a busy area with teeming crowds and milling shops. The Kabalishwara temple, built on an expanse of 33 grounds, is the most striking feature with its commanding tower on the eastern side. This 40-meter high Rajagopuram draws the attention of everybody in the area. Another entrance on the western side opposite the tank takes you straight to the main deity Kabalishwara. Places like Mylapore trace their origins to shrines located in the midst, all of which have lived to tell the tale. These have been immortalized in ancient Tamil verse, which tells us about their past glory. Our quest to find games in the Kabalishwara temple is an interesting one. When we visited the temple in 2009, it was a treasure trove of games. Games were clear, well cut, and we found numerous versions of games, including a square dice game on a 5x5 board. Several boards of Aadupuliyattam or the tiger and goat game, and 2 separate boards of a unique version of Aadupuliyattam known more popularly in northern Karnataka. This is a circle intersected by a symmetric cross and is an unusual game in these parts. It is interesting that 2 such boards were found in the temple, probably indicative of workmen who had come here in larger communities, trying hard to recreate some feeling of home. Another game which is a rarity is the game of Kattam Viliyattu, which is a 4-in-a-row game. This board is again a rare one and not found everywhere. Yet another game board found there was a game of Nakshatra Vilayattu or the star game. Deeply cut into the granite floor with clear, precise lines, many of these games were clearly indicative of specialized tools and trained craftsmen. A few faint boards were found, which had perhaps been eroded over the period of time. Among them was the game of Vetai, a battlefield game found with both 4 triangular extensions as well as 2 triangular extensions. A very faint etching of Dayakattam, the popular dice game played on a board with symmetric cross, was found in the temple too. This treasure trove of games was truly special, and we are glad to have documented them because our later visit in 2020 showed us that very few of these game boards remained. The first game board we saw was right outside the Murugan Sannidhi near a pillar. It is an Adapuliyattam but beautifully executed, with the bisecting parallels drawn in a curved form. The precise nature of the etching leaves us in no doubt that this was an artist. Not far away from this board, on a stone slab of pink granite, which was obviously placed there during the renovations to the temple, is a faint engraving of a star. Dusting kolam powder or rice flour on it, we were able to identify the 5-pointed star, which is a board for the Nakshatra Vilayattu or Panchakoni. Sadly, even in the few years since we documented this, the passage of feet and time has worn down this board. Outside the Kabalishwara Sannidhi is another faint board of Adapuliyattam. What is interesting is a slightly raised platform with a 5x5 layout of stone slabs. What is the purpose of this? We have no way of knowing. Was it a design element? What is interesting is that the 5x5 stone slab is a common board used to play games. Did the board inspire the design? Or did the design inspire the board? Or was it just a coincidence that the pattern was laid out there? Not far from the slightly raised platform is a very faint engraving of this same board. 2 more such faint engravings are visible around the temple. 2 more clear and well inscribed Adapuliyattam boards were found, one outside the Vinayagar Sannadhi and another on the outside step of the western entrance to the temple. This too is well cut and clearly defined. What caught my eye is an incomplete flower design. It looks like a random design, however this incomplete flower has been a repetitive element during much of our documentation in temples and monuments. It makes us wonder whether it is perhaps a board game. Designs such as these are used in board games both in Africa under the name Sishima and as far away as New Zealand, where it is played by the Maoris with the name Mu Torori. Could this be a game? We may never know the answer. Another interesting puzzle was 2 inscriptions of 6 pointed stars on the inner side of the western entrance to the temple. Again, the common star on which games are played is a 5-pointed one. Are these design elements or a game board? We leave the temple with more puzzles than ever before. What happened to the games that were lost? We will continue to carry them in our memories and in our documentation. This visit and quest reminded us even more about how important it is to document the game boards in temples and monuments, for they give us some insight into who we were and where we come from.
Please. No, there is absolutely no way you can determine how old the inscription or engraving in the stone is, which is what makes the discovery at the Butterball more important. We also discovered 2 I assume you've all heard of the Sullivan Kuppam temple near Tiger's Cave. This was a Murugan temple which was covered, and then during the tsunami, inscription was found indicating the presence of a Murugan temple. Excavations were carried out, and I visited the temple a few years later, and I found at what must have been the entrance thinne of the temple, on both the sides, 2 board games. One of, I think that's here, and I will show it to you. Again, Can I say with 100% certainty nobody did it after it was excavated? I cannot. I assume that the archaeological survey would have taken some photos to show it was there even then. But sadly, games have not been held with as much regard anywhere else. So a lot of people don't even know the need to document these games. But if that were true and it was there before the temple was covered, that and the game boards at the Butterball give us some indication as to the antiquity of these games, in which case they were far older than we ever thought they were.
As far as Kabali temple is concerned, we have reports on when the flooring was done. It was done from 1750 to 1800 when the Mudaliyars were
Absolutely.
And that is the time when there was a stone scarcity. Why I get to know this, there's a stone scarcity. Even Portuguese gravestones were used.
Absolutely.
You have a Portuguese gravestone next to this Adupuliyattam
Yes,
on the
yes,
Muruga temple.
yes. And again, and I'm sure the bulk of the flooring was done then. But there would have been these minor renovations carried out here and there, like this pink stone. Yeah, like this pink stone. In fact, I was at I'm trying to remember the name of the temple. Another temple where they had renovated the entire flooring. But luckily what they'd done is they'd taken the old slabs and put them around the temple. So we were able to find the games there. In fact, I was at Gandikota in Andhra a little while ago. And there outside this mosque, there's been some renovations. And it was so funny. They've evidently done renovations. This beautiful die-cut board, but it's spread across 2 stone slabs. And what these guys have done is, they've taken the slabs, put half on one side of the mosque and the other half on the other side. So you can literally go around the mosque and say, oh, there's half a slab here. Go to the other side, you find the other half. Why they couldn't have put it together, I don't know. So you do see this, that pink slab at Kapaleshwar has evidently come from somewhere else, So we do have, as Venkatesh says, most of these we assume were done 16, 17, 1800s time. But the Butterball, as far as we know, has been there for a much longer time. The Salavan Kupum temple has been unseen for a much longer time. So in which case, it could very well take our games much further back. And that makes it even more important for us to document, because I actually giving another talk during Madras Week about forgotten games of Chennai. When she was introducing me, she talked about Daikattam and Pallanguri and Paramapadam, and all of you at least know the names. But there are so many games we've completely forgotten. We don't even remember the name of the game. We don't even know if they are games anymore. And that to me is a tragedy, because we have such a rich culture. India is one of the richest culture of games in the world. And when during the chess Olympiad, we had our games set up at the location, and after the matches were over, many of the players were coming and playing. So I remember one evening we had Nigeria and Uganda fighting over a game of Adupuliyattam, and when we were talking, we realized there's so much similarity between games across the world. Could have been exchanged on trade routes. Sometimes may not even be. So let me give you a simple example. Take a black and white checkered board floor. You take 5 children to a room with a black and white checkerboard floor, leave them there for half an hour, come back. They would have come up with some 10 games around the floor, hop on one, hop on another. See, it's an instinctive reaction to familiar grids, a human reaction. And many of the grids you see for temples are familiar grids, 3x3, 4x4. You see it echoed in so many other things. In fact, it's so funny. I was walking in T Nagar the other day, and I actually have a photograph somewhere. I look at this manhole cover, and the manhole cover has the same grid as a board game. Okay, and not a very familiar board game. I'm like, wow, why did he do this grid on the manhole cover? It was so strange. And I mean, I spend obviously all my time looking at the floors, as you know from my conversation, whether it's manholes or temple floors. But it's a reaction to patterns. You'll see a game much like Dayakattam in South America. Now, there is some evidence about how there was connections between India and South America much, much earlier. We don't know. Did the games get exchanged on trade routes? Did they develop of their own? We don't know. But we have such a rich culture of games. And the best thing about traditional games is you can play them no matter who you are. You don't need to know the same language. You don't need, whether you're educated, uneducated, rich, poor, from the city, from the village. When you sit over a game, they're so elemental. Everyone can play. And we saw that at the Chess Olympiad. Different countries coming together over games. And even within India, we like to say these games are from Chennai, but you'll find similar games across our country. And we may be divided by the food we eat, the language we speak, the clothes we wear, but we are united by our games. Our games can bring us together. And if we can preserve them, it would be an incredible way of bringing people together again. I'm just going to show you a quick run through of my presentation of different boards in different temples. Just to give you an idea of how, this is the board. Can you go full screen? This is the board that started it all. I don't know why. No, go slideshow. Yeah. Yep, thanks. Yeah. This is the board that started it all, the one I tripped and saw. And at the Padsadi Swami temple. Next. This is at the Tiruvatiyur temple, at the very entrance to the temple. The game of Vete. Next.
Is it a mosaic around that?
No. It's cement actually.
Oh.
We take kolamav and dust it and then scrape it off to help with our photographs. Next one. That's cement. This is in Mahabalipuram around the butterball. Around the butterball, we documented something. And I'm talking like a 10-foot dia. I didn't even have time to go beyond. Something like 25 board games. It must have been nice, cool in the evenings, like a social club. People were playing there. Next. This is, which temple was this? Sorry, I don't have the temple name here. Next, I think this was Madurantakam. This is actually in a house right outside the Kapalishwar temple. In their house, this board.
But this is mosaic.
This is in the house in the floor, not mosaic, cement floor. Inside the house. In those days, so many people had games in their floor, on their thinness. This is one of the few we've been able to document. Next. Kapalishwar temple, 2009. Next. This is Mahabalipuram. Dayakattam, many of you would have played. This is the larger one, Pathakattadayam. And this you see, Suchindram Kovilla, I think I saw 8 of these boards in that temple. And what was interesting is the offering slab had the same pattern. That was surprising. This is what we call single track race games. This is at the Tiruvatiyur Kovil outside the Amman Sanadi, which has since been tiled over. We've lost this game. This is an old Paramapadam. One other request I have, if any of you have old calendars, Diwali Malars, where they used to have old Paramapadams, really old ones, please do share photos with us. We're not finding any of the old ones. I had a fantastic collection of about 20 of them. Lost it all during the floods in Chennai. All of them. Luckily, that time we were not taking as many photos. I thought it was safe. This is one of the few that survived.
You tried in Roja Muthiya?
I've tried. They don't have too many. This is the single player star game again from Kapalishwar. Next. This is an interesting one. This looks like Pallanguri. I actually photographed this in Palmyra in Syria, in a Roman temple. Now, Palmyra in Syria was a very important point on the Silk Route between East and West. I was very fortunate to travel there with my father, and while everyone else was looking at the gorgeous architecture, I was looking at the floor, and I was so excited. In Africa, the game of Mancala, as they called it, has survived so much. In coffee shops, they play it. It's so much more popular and still prevalent than it is here. But much simpler version. Kalle, seeds, just like we did. Not so much shori because it was in the desert. Stones, seeds. The Bedouins play with seeds over there. Stones. Now, of course, this is at the Chennakesava Perumal temple. This is, you would have seen it in a couple of movies. They have this gambling game, no, where they'll have 4 things and the dice. So this, we suspect, could be that. Because gambling was a part of our tradition. In the Rig Veda, there is a song called the Gambler's Lament. And it goes, play not with your dice, O gambler, your cattle await you and also your wife. You know, so there's such a history of dice games going back to the Vedas. So it's not something new. We suspect this is a gambling game. This is a 4 in a row game, very rare board to see. I've seen this board only in one other place. Again, this is Kapalishwar again, which we've lost, forgotten, gone. Next. This is the game of Dadi. This game, sorry. Go back to the previous one.
Why is the stone in the game so different from the adjacent stone?
That would have been a stone that came later. Those are things we document. When we document the games, we make a note of what the parallel stones were like. You'll see that in many places. You know, that pink slab is one. In the Tiruvuttur temple, as you enter the main sanctum, you'll see 5 stone slabs. Almost each slab is a different shade. So evidently, they were placed at later times. This game, Dadi, this game has brought up more questions than any other game. Nobody remembers the game. They call it Dadi in Andhra, Telangana. There they play it still. There are many interesting questions about the game, but I don't have enough time to go into all of them. And this is interesting. The same board, Alfonso X of Castile wrote a book about games. And he actually says, because mankind has so many worries, they invented games to keep them from worrying too much and getting stressed. This is in 1283. So if we think we're stressed today, he evidently thought mankind was stressed back then. And he has documented a lot of games of his time. And this board you see there, I was fortunate enough to be able to see the book and photograph this particular board. I couldn't do more than that. I had very little time. But you see this board there. And this board, we know there are a lot of parallels. You see both in the West and in the East. But there are a couple of other interesting things about this board. For those of you who are familiar with mandalas and yantras, the Kala Chakra mandala has a very similar makeup to this board. 2, when you look at temple architecture and you see the base design, you know, the 3 levels, you know, the outer, the inner and the sanctum. When you see it drawn, it looks very like this. So in fact, Sujata Shankar, whose head's intact, was saying, could this have been just etched on the floor of temples and, you know, to indicate how the architecture should be with Kavi for everything else. Kavi has gone and people have actually continued to play on it. Possibly, we don't know. I do know that archaeologists who found this in a little stone slab with some Brahmi script assumed it was a temple plan. And then I saw it and called and told them, you know, this is also a game. So we don't know what it was, what inspired what. But this particular one is Spain. But we do know that people have said, including Mr. V. Raghavan, who's written a beautiful book called Sports and Pastimes of India, said play predates man. And most sociologists believe that, as they say, animals did not wait for mankind to teach them how to play. So when did play come into being and when did these games develop? We don't know. Next. See, this is the temple architecture thing. You see the same 3 concentric squares, Next. Then, skip this. This is the butterball under which I found a bunch of games. There are many games under the butterball which don't make logical sense to have been there as games. They must have been there before the butterball. There are many like that, but particularly these two are so, one is literally half hidden, and I think I have a photo of that next. These are all near the butterball. Next. 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 See, this is another version of Adapuliyattam. Next. Oh, this is, no, I think I've missed that. So, try, continue. This is the one. I don't know how clearly you can see it. I'll leave the slide up for you to come up and see later. Over here, you can see the game of Dadi. And over here, you can see the part of a game. The rest of the game is literally, the ball is sitting on the rest of the game. There is no way, I've tried putting a pen inside, there's no way, anything. Go to the next one, is there other photo there of me? So this is me, and this is where the game is. You can see beyond this, my phone can't go. So it is obvious that the games came there before the ball came there. And that to me is absolutely fascinating. Next. This is at the Salavankuppam temple. Next. This is the entrance, 2 slabs. Next. This is again the game of Dadi on one side at the same temple. Next. This is another board I've never seen before, but weirdly enough, within a month of doing this, I was documenting the Tiruporur Murugan temple. Next. And I saw the same board over there. So, and I do know there was, from little I've been talking to historians, Venkatesh can probably tell us more. There was trade between Tiruporur and Mahabalipuram. So the game, this is the only other place I've seen that particular board. Next. Yeah. Thank you. I think we're out of time. Any questions? Happy to. Do you want to just pull up that one slide again if anyone wants to take a closer look? Thank you all. I'm open to questions. Temples, monuments, not so much in forts. So Sadras fort has a Adapuliyattam. I haven't seen as much in forts as I've seen in temples, which is one of the reasons I tend to believe that it was the stonemasons more than the soldiers. I'm not saying the soldiers wouldn't have done anything, but I think it may have been less. Also, they may have been there for a shorter period of time, but I've seen less in forts. I have seen it in temples. I've seen it in public spaces like your Mahabalipuram, of course. JNU University, Delhi, I've seen a few slabs with the thing, and I don't know what was there before that. I don't know enough of that history. Temples, 2 reasons. One, temples took years to build. So the masons, the artisans lived there and probably did it. Also, don't forget, temples were not just about religion. They were social, cultural spaces. So, but I still don't think, however social they were, people would have liked someone going with a shutti and cutting a game. So it must have been done during the building or renovation of the temple. Except sometimes you'll see very faint boards, Kiri Namari, that people write their name and I love you and all this nonsense. Some could be there. But the bulk of them, I believe, must have been stonemasons, artisans, maybe some soldiers using their bayonets, because nothing else could have cut through hard granite like that.
You told about the slab, raise the slab. It's 500
So just outside the Sanadi, there is just a raised slab. That's all. It must have been an offering slab where they've done pujas before. But what I find interesting is many temples, the slab design and the game you find in that same temple are exactly the same. The grid for the slab and the grid for the game are exactly the same. So I'm wondering whether the grid inspired the game or the game inspired the grid.
It is 10 by 10.
In Suchindram, it's 10 by 10. Kapaleshwar, it's 5 by 5. In Andhra, I've seen a temple where it is a 3 by 3. And the same game you see in the temple. That, I don't know what the correlation is. But I have been reading about other countries, people doing research, where they're asking the same questions. Was it an offering slab or a game board? So I'm curious, I don't know. What defines the grid for that slab? Is it just creativity, artistry, or something more? I don't know. I don't know enough. The problem with studying traditional games is you need to know archaeology, architecture, sociology, history. I simply don't have the physical time to become an expert on everything. So I just keep asking questions wherever I go. Hopefully one day somebody will get up and say, I'll give you the answer to it. See, they know that it is a slab, but they don't. The pattern, they say, yeah, it is a familiar pattern. They say, mandamam kuda ipdidam panuvanga. But why did you come up with this particular pattern for this? No. No, nothing specific.
Actually, a 9 by 9. The Agamam has a 9
See, I'll give you another example. Outside the Thiruvanmiyur temple, Amman Sanadi, there is a grid which I didn't show today, which is 48 squares, 4 by 12. And I hadn't seen that board before. So I kept asking everybody at the temple, Sthapatis. They said, Adu 48 mandala puja panava to consecrate the temple. Maybe it was for that calendar. But I saw a sculpture of Shiva Parvati playing dice in Ellora. And the board is exactly the same. I honestly think, because I can't tell for sure, that the game that is hidden under the butterball is also the same board. And then once I saw the Ellora thing, I started looking outside. I kind of get a sense of what game it could be. Was it done for the 48 Mandala Puja? Is it coincidence? But then I was talking to 2-3 people who live around the temple, traditionally for generations. One of them was saying, "Idu Paramapada mari valayaduvanga." And I do know the game which I think it is a dice game. So, and the movement, Paramapadam has this movement, what they call an ox plow movement. It's the way an ox moves when it's plowing, it'll go round and round, like this. The Paramapadam has the same movement. This game, which I think it is, has the same movement. So I suspect it must be the game, but was the game inspired by the 48 Mandala Puja calendar, or is it coincidence? I don't know. But it's very fascinating study. The more I know, the more I want to find out. And the more I find out, I feel I know less and less. Because it asks more and more questions every time.
So normally, say we try to classify. Say there are people say there are just 16 types of jokes. We just rotate. So how many types of games would you classify?
Okay, broadly there is this Miss Murray, who is considered one of the great game researchers and writers. Broadly has classified them into race games, which is your Paramapadam, where you go from point A to point B, whoever is the first. Then you have games of alignment, that's 3 in a row games, which are tic-tac-toe is the simplest. The game of Dadi is one of the most complex. Then you have strategy games, which is your chess. So, the game of Vete, where you have 2 groups evenly matched, same number of players on each side trying to defeat each other. Then you have a subsection of strategy games called hunt games. Our Adupuliyatam comes into hunt games. Now the thing about Adupuliyatam, how many people have played Adupuliyatam? Not many. So, Adupuli Atam, you have 3 tigers and 15 goats. Which means one player has 3 coins, one player has 15. That's very rare in a game. It's what we call an asymmetric game. Right? You have 3 tigers, 15 goats. Now, if you play chess, you know, my goal is to capture Venkatesh's king and his goal is to capture my king. So, both our goals are the same. But in Adupuli Atam, it's not like that. The goal of the tiger is to kill the goats. The goal of the goats is to surround the tigers. Right? Now, the moves are different. A tiger can jump over to kill a goat. A goat can never jump. You will never see that in chess. Every game, piece in chess has an equivalent piece in the opponent's side. So let me tell you one more thing. I hope I'm not running over time. Please tell me to shut up. If I start talking about games, I can talk for hours. So whenever you want me to shut up, just tell me. So I'll tell you, the game of chess is considered one of, many people believe it came from India. That's a separate lecture we'll do another day. But it was a game of kings and zamindars. You will find jade boards, you'll find silver boards, marble boards. It was a game where the good of the all was more important than the good of the individual. The prime thing was to protect the king. Correct? You can sacrifice all the pieces, but the king must be protected. Right? This is a very important thing for leaders. Whether it's a king, a zamindar, a prime minister, or a CEO of a company, they have to look at the overall good. They cannot say, oh, avanukku vandu oru kolandai irukku, let us not sack him although he is not doing work, or worry about individual problems. They have to look at the overall good. So when I say, oh, my chief minister takes a decision that affects me personally, if it's good for the state, or prime minister takes it for the good of the country and I'm paying the price, that's me. Adupuli Atam is a peasant game. You will not find jade boards, you will not find silver boards, marble boards. In Adupuli Atam, only if the goats come together can they defeat the tiger. And it's like people say it's teamwork. No, it's more than teamwork. Teamwork is, what is that? They'll put a net over the birds and they'll all fly away together. That's teamwork. Adupuli Atam goes much deeper than that. If there is a goat here and the tiger here, and the tiger can jump over this goat and kill it, another goat has to go behind and prevent the tiger from jumping. So it's beyond teamwork. It's supporting the community of goats. Each goat has to support every other goat in order for the community to be strong. And sociologically, these are 2 completely different models. One is every individual of the community needs to be strong for the community to flourish. In my other avatar, working with the development sector, I worked a lot with HIV/AIDS affected people. And I know how they struggled. Even today, I run an NGO that supports over 1,000 children with HIV. And I know their fear in just saying, I'm HIV positive. Some of my kids are incredible, rank holders. I would like to call them, bring them here, ask the chief minister to give them an award. But I can't do that. Because the minute someone knows they're HIV positive, the landlord will throw them out, nobody will marry them, the boss will kick them out, there'll be problems. So unless the community comes together, the community cannot thrive. And every member has to come together. And that is why I think Adupuli Atam is one of the most incredible games in the world. And people believe that what we call utopia, the ideal world, will be real only when both these sociological models work in tandem. The good of the all and the community working together. If everything works in tandem, we have what is called utopia. Thank you. Any other questions? We're out of time, I think. Last question. Then I'll stay on. So those who want to ask can talk to me personally, while others who are sick of me can leave.
So we know in Mahabharata, the game of dice played a crucial role. Similarly, Tamil Sangam literature, are there any references?
There are many, many. That I'll give you another lecture. You call me again, I'll do another lecture on stories about traditional games. I don't want to specifically talk about anything right off the top, so let's talk about it later. Yeah. Thank you. There is an interesting story, not Sangam literature, about how Adi Shankara challenges goddess Meenakshi in Madurai to a game of dice. I don't know if any of you know this. So there is a very interesting story on that. Close to home, not Tamil, but there is an interesting story on why Krishna and Guruvayur likes to play with Gundumani. They're both true stories, so I will tell you. I'm happy to step off and tell you so others can go home.
That was a very different type of talk that we usually have. And this relates to most of us. Very well done, Vinita. One element I allowed to tell you. Some places are so glorified. For example, Princeton University, 1906, this is some story I always love to tell. There is a student who was drunk, throws the empty beer bottle into the principal's room. Right? And he gets suspended and dismissed. Within 10 years, both the boy and the principal get Nobel Prizes. So, some places, you fall on history. Typically, what will happen, like Vinita says, that's what that thought came to me when Kabali you will fall on history. You will know that something has been happening. Games have already been. One thing I wanted to add is, most of these games don't need specific boards or coins. So they are the games of the common men who occupy 95% of your population. If you chess now, you need to have 32 coins. 32 coins, chess game. Now in the ages of plastic and celluloid, you can do all that. For example, a lot of small things that I don't divert. The elephant would have become extinct if celluloid was not invented for, bakelite was not invented for your snooker balls. The elephants are being killed so that the ivory was being made into snooker balls. At such a rate, they would have become extinct. So in the games going to the common man happened in the last 100 years. New games, like I love the example that she said. ஒரு 4 பசங்கள ரூம்ல தனியா விட்டீங்கன்னா, especially I come from Chettinad. Chettinadல you have those squares, black and white square floors. They invent games. We don't have enough ball உடைஞ்சு போச்சு, இல்ல ball கிணத்துக்குள்ள விழுந்துருச்சு, ball அடுத்த வீட்ல விழுந்துருச்சு, they invent a new game. So that creativity of a child that has been alive for generations, and especially in a new city like Madras, which step by step add panni varappa, new people were coming in, new games were coming in, new permutations were being formed. And I like to think that the Portuguese took these games from Africa to India to New Zealand to the Philippines to Samoa. Update, they would have all moved. So very popular games would have moved very, very fast. And games in Rapo, I should say that the world has 300 grandmasters, India has 70, and Madras has 30. We don't have chess classes. We are very good in playing. So game is not a pastime. Game is going to be a part of your brain, a part of your psyche. So Madras has proved that for a long time. And I thought our Pramada base for us to look into the other aspects, the non-tangible aspects of history. I think she opened her eyes to it. Thank you and happy Independence Day tomorrow.
How can we Madras Day without Venkatesh being a part of it? That's why we used to say this. He has been a part of our Madras Day all these years. Anyway, you are again a part of it.
All the best.
Mama, please come here. Please come.
Thank you very much.
Very nice. Wonderful.
Thank
We all
you.
enjoyed.
Thank
Open the eyes.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
So much research she has done. There is nothing that you know.